Once again, the Duke Blue Devils are back in the win column. A win on Saturday over Maryland Eastern Shore improved Duke's overall record to 10-2. Let's talk about the win in these first 12 games. What have we learned about Duke men's hoops? We're doing that on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. It's so great to have you here with us on this Monday. What a fun episode of Locked On Blue Devils we've got planned for you today, as we're going to be recapping the Duke men's basketball victory over Maryland Eastern Shore, talking about the first 12 games of the season for Duke as a whole, and looking towards the games to come for the Duke Blue Devils. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to our podcast for free wherever you get your podcast. Also subscribe on the YouTube platform as we continue to climb our way towards 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Your support means the absolute world. The show can be found on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils, and I'm on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. Super excited to bring on my good pal, Jason Evans from the Duke Basketball Report with me on today's show to talk all things Duke hoops. And Jason, it's good to see you once again, and it's good to be talking about a Duke team that keeps finding ways to win, my friend.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think even though that game on Saturday was, it was a game where Ken Pomeroy's prediction chart never went below like 98%. It was not a game where the outcome was ever in doubt. It was frankly a game where Duke didn't play all that well, and they still won by close to 30 points. I think we're going to look back on it as a significant game for a few different players. And I'm ready to talk to you, Mr. _JJ_Jackson.
A lot of underscores in there for sure. Well, look, it's a game that immediately rewrote the history books, Jason, right? Because for the first time ever in Duke men's basketball, Jeremy Roach did not play in the competition. And so for the first time ever, Duke started 5 true freshmen, which they'd never done before. We've been talking about sort of this one-and-done era of Duke basketball for over a decade now at this point, but never before had 5 true freshmen been the first 5 players out there on the floor for Duke, and they did that on Saturday against Maryland Eastern Shore.
Yeah, and that's one of the significant things I want to talk about. Not the fact that they had 5 freshmen, but the freshmen that they picked to fill out that starting lineup when Jeremy Roach went out. Because if you'd asked me coming into this game, okay, Roach is not going to play, who is Duke going to put in his place? My first choice probably would have said, that's Derek White. Sorry, not Derek White. That's who they picked.
Yes.
That it would be Jacob Grandison. I think that would have been the one that sort of, based on performances so far this year, would have made the most sense. To be honest, the other one that would have made a lot of sense would have been if they had picked, blanking on it. Oh my gosh, I can't believe, Jalen Blakes.
Jalen Blakes.
I can't believe that happened to me. It was like his name just went from my head. Either one of those guys have sort of been ahead of Whitehead in the rotation thus far. I think it was significant, though, that John Shire chose to go with Derek Whitehead, because Derek Whitehead is the guy who everyone says has the most potential of anybody on this team. That's what I happen to believe, having seen him some in high school, in the high school all-star games, knowing his reputation. The guy that is going to take this Duke team that is currently like a top 15 kind of team, and I think that they are ranked appropriately. They're like 13th, 12th. I think that's about where they should be right now. The guy who can take them from that level to next level, top 5 real national championship contender, is Derek Whitehead. And to me, it says something that John Shire said, okay, Derek, it is your turn. It is your time. I think it is entirely possible, I'm not saying this for sure, but it's possible that when we look back on this season, that this is the first game of many that Derek Whitehead is the starter. And in fact, I think it's possible that he starts every single game the rest of the year. I'm not saying that's probable, especially this Wake Forest game coming up, because I don't think they're going to have a lot of practices between the Wake Forest game. But I think that after that, as we go through the Christmas break and approach New Year, because Duke has one game in 20 days. One game
Right.
in 20 days. That's a lot of now, the guys are going to be taking exams. The guys are going to be studying. The guys are going to be going home for Christmas for a couple days. But there's a lot of time in there for practices, for working on individual stuff, all that jazz. And I think that Dariq Whitehead is the guy who will benefit the most from that. And I'm saying, I'm not going to call it as in like I'm sure of it, but I won't be surprised if not at the Wake Forest game, the Florida State game on the 31st, Dariq Whitehead is in the starting lineup and he never leaves the starting lineup.
Yeah, Duke wins 82-55. Dariq Whitehead, a career-high 15 points. As you can see, if you're watching us on YouTube, our box score available. 1 of 5 shooting from three-point range for Dariq. But later in the game, a crossover dribble, a drive to the rim, and a right-handed tomahawk jam. That's what we've seen in his high school highlights, in his AAU highlights. That's the player that you're expecting to see for the Duke Blue Devils in Dariq Whitehead. But he's coming back from a foot injury, so it's fair that we hadn't seen that quite yet. It's really positive that we did see a play like that towards the end. We can throw out the numbers all we want to, and yes, it is important for these freshmen to get to celebrate career highs. That's really fun for them to keep going up on those totals. But plays like that, I think, are going to have the bigger impact when you look at games like this, knowing that you've seen what you were watching in his high school days.
And to me, the significant thing about Dariq Whitehead was a 3-minute stretch from about the 7:40 mark to about the 4:40 mark of the second half. That was that 3-minute stretch where he scored 9 points. He hit his three-pointer. He had that ridiculous dunk, but he also had a couple other really nice shots that he made. 9 points in 3 minutes. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of guys in college basketball. There are not a lot of guys on the Duke roster who are capable of doing that kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying, look, if you said to Kyle Filipowski, I want you to take every shot for the next 3 minutes, probably gets 9 points. But I'm talking about in the flow of the offense, playing the way we would normally play, guys who are so explosive, so capable of getting their own shot that they can get 9 points in 3 minutes. That's what we're getting in Dariq Whitehead. He's not going to do it often, but the fact that he did it this one game shows us he can do it. And man, my biggest thing about him is the time he missed was when everybody comes and gels together.
Yeah.
It's not like this was a guy who got injured in December and then missed 4 weeks into the middle of January, where they had already been in the flow of the team. While the team was forming, while the team was coming together, while they were learning what they could be in the preseason, he wasn't there. He could do nothing but sit on the sidelines and watch. So, yeah, no wonder it's taking him some time to really get integrated, to figure out where his teammates are, for them to figure out where he is, for the coaches to develop trust in him. But I just, this 20-day stretch, these 20 days, we're in the mid, we're right at the start of it right now. This is so important for him. It's just, this guy is probably going to be a lottery pick. He hopes to be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. It starts now.
And I can't wait to see the player that he's going to be through this. And as he sets his sights on becoming that next level NBA player, it starts with performances like he had on Saturday against Maryland Eastern Shore and utilizing this practice time. So 15 points for Dariq in the win. He was tied for the team lead in that scoring effort by Tyrese Proctor, who had 15 points as well. And man, Jason, I tell you what, Proctor continues to get more and more comfortable on the ball every single game. It's so much fun to watch.
I'm of the belief now that Tyrese Proctor is, at least for most of the game, until we get, maybe at the very end of a contest or a close contest, that Tyrese Proctor really is running point guard, and that Jeremy Roach, who wasn't available in this game, but Jeremy Roach is playing more of a little bit more of an off-the-ball kind of role for this team. And that's because Tyrese Proctor, I think, maybe runs the team better than Jeremy Roach does. Roach is great at getting his own shot, getting to the rim, getting in the lane, taking those short-range pull-up jumpers that are so effective for him. Tyrese Proctor, I think, is better at getting his other teammates involved. He had a pass in this game. He had a play. It was one of Jaden Schute's three-pointers. I think it was the second of the three-pointers that Jaden Schute buried, where Tyrese Proctor drew the entire team, the entire opposition, down close to the baseline, and then threw a pass like across his body, and he zipped it like on a line out to Jaden Schute at the top of the key, and Jaden Schute buried a three-pointer. It was a really, really great pass, and we see that kind of thing from Tyrese Proctor again and again. He's the best player on this team at getting easy opportunities for his teammates, and that's why I think he was clearly the point guard in this game. That's why I think he's sort of effectively the point guard going forward.
And that's something you want to continue to see for Tyrese Proctor, getting more and more comfortable being that lead guard. I'm reminded of some conversations that you and I had on this very podcast before the start of the year, and I want to get to those in just a moment and also talk about a fellow freshman that wasn't in the starting lineup that really impressed folks with his performance on Saturday. And we're going to do that after our first time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. This time of year and at any time, making your next hire is so important. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Add your purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, we move forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson alongside my buddy Jason Evans from the Duke Basketball Report podcast. So I mentioned another freshman, again, that didn't get a chance to start. Duke makes history starting 5 true freshmen for the first time ever. And Jaden Schutt, who has already had a couple of DNPs, CDs, did not play coaches' decisions to start the year, goes 3 for 3 from three-point range, and is basically the advertised player that we thought we were getting when he committed to play basketball for Duke.
On my podcast, you just mentioned that on the Duke Basketball Report, we break our games, our game summaries down into a few different categories. And the very first thing we do is we do what we call the headline. It's like we're a newspaper writer and we're putting up a headline for each game. And I think something significant happened in this game, which is that in the post game, Jon Scheyer had a headline. The very first thing that Jon Scheyer talked about in his post-game news conference was Jaden Schutt. And he immediately praised the work ethic, talked about how hard Jaden Schutt has been going in practice, and he said it is starting to pay off for him. You're absolutely right. Duke has had a 9-man rotation up until this point in the season, and Jaden Schutt has been the 10th guy, the odd man out. I don't know for sure that has changed, but I think we got glimpses of some of the things that Jaden Schutt can bring to the table in this game that may create an opportunity for this to become a 10-man rotation and for him to be a part of it. I'm not saying this is a kid who's going to average double figures in terms of minutes per game. I'm not saying he's going to have a lot of games where he takes 3 or 4 three-pointers, but I think he can find a little role as a floor spacer. This is a team that has struggled with outside shooting. I mean, goodness knows. We've had some Oregon State, anybody?
Yeah.
But, we've had some games where this team has been really bad from the perimeter. And Jaden Schutt is an outstanding three-point shooter. And I really thought the thing that was holding him back, the reason he wasn't playing, was because I thought of his defense. It's a big adjustment for players, especially Jaden Schutt didn't play like big-time high school basketball. He wasn't on one of these really elite EYBL teams. And I think that maybe he didn't get as much work against this kind of caliber of athlete as some of the other players that come out of high school. So I think it's been a big adjustment to him to play defense. His defense now, admittedly, Maryland Eastern Shore, not a good team.
Sure.
Let's be real clear. One of the bottom, 30 or 50 teams in the nation, according to Ken Pomeroy and the other folks who pay attention to every team, all 363 teams. They're in the 300s. Let's just put it that way. But I thought Jaden Schutt's defense looked passable. And if his defense looks passable, then you can get him on the floor because you need that shooting.
Yeah, 5 rebounds, 3 of 3 from three-point range.
Yeah, by the way, Jon Scheyer pointed out that the very first thing that Jaden Schutt did when he was in the game was grab an offensive rebound.
Yep.
And that Scheyer was like, I love that. And that this is a kid who can do more than just fire up from deep. And that would be big toward Schutt finding, an early role on this club.
And if you're Jaden Shoot, hearing your coach or seeing it after the fact, and so much so with that quote from John Shire, Duke men's basketball, their social staff is so strategic with what they're putting out there. And we're going to put out this big standalone graphic with this quote from Jaden Shoot, right? Like, I feel like knowing that you are the shooter for this team, that is my one job. When I get into the game, I'm there to knock down shots. If they're not falling, that could be a little deflating and that sort of thing. But to see, okay, wait a minute, there are other ways to sort of contribute. And that's just a part of the learning curve that these freshmen go through.
And it is so important to note when you really look at basketball, and I'm sure you do this, it's not only that Jaden Shoot is out there to hit 3-pointers for you. He's out there to provide spacing. And spacing isn't just, I hit my shot. It's that the opposing team knows they need to look out for me. They know, they cannot leave me alone out here. And that creates extra space inside. This is a Duke team that has a lot of guys who are really good at getting into the lane and taking short range jumpers or creating opportunities for their teammates. I mean, that is what Jeremy Roach, that is what Tyrese Proctor, that's what Dariq Whitehead do outstanding. And having a guy like Jaden Shoot out there on the perimeter means there's one less defender who can clog up that middle for you. And by the way, if they choose not to clog up the middle, if they leave Jaden Shoot, that's a mistake because he's going to hit the 3-pointer.
He's going to knock it down for sure. JJ Jackson here with Jason Evans from the Duke Basketball Report podcast on a Monday edition of Locked On Blue Devils. Typically, when you are brainwashed by somebody, I think there's a little bit of a negative connotation that can go along with that. But I want to let people know on how Jason Evans has brainwashed me. On this very podcast, before the season started, the one question that you had of many about the Duke men's basketball team, Jason, was talking about how Jeremy Roach factors in as the junior captain for this squad in terms of sharing the basketball versus finding his shot. And the assist totals were going to be so key. I'm not kidding. I stare at the assists and shot attempts in every box score after each game this season, thinking of that very conversation we had, Jason. So we look at Maryland Eastern Shore in particular because Roach didn't play. Duke walks away with 18 assists on 31 made shots. Your assessment of the Eastern Shore game and then 12 games into the year, where are you still at with that line of thinking that you had before the season?
So I think it's become abundantly clear, and we're talking now about the whole season because Jeremy Roach didn't play against Maryland Eastern Shore. I think it's become abundantly clear that Jeremy Roach is not going to turn into a guy who regularly gets 5+ assists in a game. I think he's done it maybe once or twice this season, but not really often. Part of that is that he's sharing, the main ball handler, the main facilitator role with Tyrese Proctor. Part of that is that, Jalen Blakes and some of the other perimeter guys are coming in and Roach doesn't feel the need.
Jalen Blakes has had a couple of 5-assist games already, and Roach hasn't been there. Yeah.
Yeah. What I've come to the conclusion is that this is a team where there are a lot of guys who are going to create opportunities for their teammates. There are a lot of different guys who are going to get assists, rather than this being a team where we have 18 assists and some guy has 9. This is a game where we have 18 assists and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different guys have 2 or more assists. I mean, that's saying something.
There you go.
And you're seeing it from the big man. I mean, Kyle Filipowski picks up assists. Ryan Young is a nice passer. Derek Lively does a really nice job of high-low passing, from the high post and such. So in the preseason, you and I talked about, is Roach going to facilitate for others? I don't think he's going. That's not going to be his primary role. He's shown that he's more of a scorer than a facilitator, but that's okay because lo and behold, and I didn't realize that it would be this way. We have so many other guys who are capable of doing that for us. Yeah,
it's really good to see those guys step up when you need it. I mean, you need the ball to be. You got to spread the ball around to all the different scorers that Duke has this season. I think it's also indicative, Jason, that we haven't seen as many 20-point scoring outings from anybody, right? Like last year, there are so many, you lose track of all the 20-point games that Paulo Banchero had for the squad. AJ Griffin had 27 in Chapel Hill last season, right? And we just really haven't seen one guy exclusively take over scoring the basketball. And I think also indicative of the ball strength that this Duke offense has had.
Yeah, there are so many people who've made this comment, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. This team does not have a Zion Williamson. It does not have a Paulo Banchero. It does not have a dominant player on offense who you can give the ball to and say, hey, take it and create it and do what we need you to do. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I'll tell you in March or April. But it is a reality that we're going to have to deal with for this entire season. And part of that reality is, I don't know that I'd have to look. I honestly haven't looked at the stats. Is there anybody in this team averaging 15 points per game? Is Kyle Filipowski averaging 15 points per game?
At one point, he was at 15.4, 15.7 or something like that.
Down a little bit lately.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of team where there are going to be, I don't know, like maybe 7 different guys who are capable of leading the team in scoring on any given night. And there may not be anyone who leads the team in scoring more than 40% of the time. Think about the past few years. That was not the case. I can't even remember the last time that was the case. Let me go back a little bit. Maybe going back to like Kyle Singler, Nolan Smith, John Shire kind of time, because those guys each shared a little bit of it. But I mean, over the past decade, there's almost always been, not saying there weren't other good players in the team or other guys capable of having big nights, but there's always been like one guy who you went, hey, Jabari Parker, Austin Rivers, Jahlil Okafor. I mean, I can go through and name them for you one by one. And it feels like this Duke team is different from those other teams, not just because there's a different head coach, but because there's not as much maybe elite scoring talent, but there's more in the middle, so to speak, more guys who are capable of doing it.
Grandison has come close.
I think we've already had, I think it's either 5 or 6 guys. Maybe it's 5 guys.
That's what I was trying to think in my head. Right.
Who's led the team in scoring in a game this year already.
Right.
Yeah. Now, it's mostly been Filipowski.
Right.
Early in the season, but part of that is, Whitehead has been hurt. Lively's been. I won't be surprised if we end up with 7 or 8 different guys who lead this team in scoring at some point this season. I mean, Ryan Young has shown he's capable of it.
Right.
You give Jaden Schutt, if Jaden Schutt gets enough minutes,
Yep. No kidding. Yeah, I'm excited to see the rest of the season sort of play out, the rest of the 2022 before we jump into the heart of ACC play coming up here and more. So let's take one more break here on Locked On Blue Devils, and we'll start to wind things down after this final timeout here on the show today. At Locked On Blue Devils, we believe that home should be where you and your family feel the safest, especially over the holidays coming up. That's why this season, give yourself and your family the gift of peace and protection with the #1 rated home security system, SimpliSafe. And right now, SimpliSafe is offering Locked On Blue Devils listeners 40% off a new security system, which is so amazing, and you just don't want to put this off. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real, so you can get a higher priority police response. Don't miss your chance to save big on my favorite security system. Get 40% off any new system at simplisafe.com/lockedoncollege today. That's simplisafe.com/lockedoncollege. There's no place like SimpliSafe. No safe like SimpliSafe. Moving forward and wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, I'm JJ Jackson alongside my buddy Jason Evans from the Duke Basketball Report podcast. One more time, Jason, tell me a little bit about that podcast and what you guys are up to these days.
Yeah, unlike you, we're not pulling out one of these every day. We're doing about 2, maybe 3 of them a week. We're just in the midst of the regular season. There's all kinds of fun stuff that we do in the off season, as you know.
Yes.
I don't know how you pull it off, although you're covering all the other sports as well. But no, for the most part, we're just locked in on the regular season and the games that are being played. We're ready for the ACC season to really start. This Maryland Eastern Shore game, even though we're talking early December, last non-conference game of the season for Duke. Every other game we have coming up is against the rest of the ACC, and an ACC that, by the way, looks like it's tremendously stratified. They're like, I guess 4, maybe 5 teams that seem like they're good.
Right.
And then the middle and the bottom of the ACC seem pretty atrocious. But that puts pressure on you as Duke. You can't let up and lose one of those games to one of those teams that's just frankly bad. And it can happen, in an ACC, go on the road or something. I don't know. Go on the road to Florida State. Florida State's won 2 games this year. Are you telling me that The game at Florida State is an easy game. No, it's not, even though they've only won 2 games all year. So I'm ready for these ACC games to start and really eager to see Duke play some of the better teams in the ACC. Virginia Tech looks really good. North Carolina, of course. And there, maybe there's 1 or 2 others.
Where is your concern right now with the Duke team?
Probably on offense.
Okay.
I'm really eager for Dariq Whitehead to start showing what he's capable of. I think that we're getting more and more of Derek Lively. I would love for him to be a little more of an offensive factor. The thing with Derek Lively, and really quick, I'm just going to sidetrack.
Yeah, go for it.
The thing with Derek Lively that drives me crazy is that he'll have stretches, like in the first half, from the 15-minute mark to the 5-minute mark. He was grabbing tons of rebounds, blocking shots like crazy. Just everything they threw up, he was blocking it. He had some assists. He was getting deflections and steals, and he was even scoring a little bit. And then he went away. And we've seen this happen a lot. Derek Lively's great for a half, and then the other half, suddenly he's just not there that much. So I want him to get more consistent. I desperately want Dariq Whitehead to become more efficient. He's shooting a lot. I mean, he scored 15 points in this game. We talked about that the 9 points in 3 minutes, but the rest of the game, he was taking a lot of shots that didn't go down. And that's been the story with him so far this year. His shooting percentage is not what you need it to be, and his shot selection is not what you need it to be. I'm a big believer in taking good shots. But
that's why it's been so awesome that Duke's excelled rebounding the basketball, right? And creating second chances so you get more looks at it. Imagine because you're right. Imagine earlier in the podcast today, we're praising, okay, you don't know who's going to be the leading scorer night to night and how awesome that versatility can kind of be. If you're missing shots and then not getting the rebounds, world of trouble. Oh, my word.
Yeah. Oh, let's be clear. This Duke team is the number 1 offensive rebounding team in the country. Number 1, the best.
Out of 363, the number we shared earlier. Yeah.
Yes, but their 3-point percentage, they're hitting 31.6%. That's 243rd in the nation. They are basically one of the bottom 100 teams in all of college basketball.
Yikes.
At 3-point shooting.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to be a good offensive rebounding team. And their 2-point shooting isn't that great. We're 150th at 2-point shooting. I mean, it's okay, but that's right in the middle of the pack. So if you're a bad 3-point shooting team, bottom 100, you're right in the middle of the pack as a 2-point shooting team. You damn well better be a great offensive rebounding team. Or the other alternative, which is, I think, partially, the story of this Duke team, they're way better on defense than I expected they would be. I got a question for you, JJ, and your listeners are going to love this. Your listeners, viewers, I don't know. We're on YouTube, so viewers, listeners.
We got it all. Yeah.
We got it all. I want you to guess. So we played 12 games.
Okay.
How many times do you think a team that's played Duke this year has reached their scoring average in the season? How many times have a team that's played Duke gotten to their typical average scoring output?
It's not many, because I still recall a game this season where Duke only gave up 38 points in one basketball game, and I would like to think a Division I team is scoring more than that. So out of 12, I'm going to say 7.
No. The answer is 0, my friend.
Wow.
0. Duke has not given up an average scoring game to any of their opponents this year. Obviously, it changes from opponent to opponent what an average scoring game is. Not a single time.
I knew the defense was wow.
Even Purdue, that frankly blew our doors off late,
right,
where we couldn't score for the final 7 minutes. Even that game, which was clearly our worst game of the season, Purdue didn't reach its average for the year. Iowa is game earlier this week, arguably Duke's best game of the season. Iowa is a prolific scoring team, averages better than 80 points per game. They were close to 25 points under their scoring average when they played Duke.
Yeah. Totally took Chris Murray out of the game. Yeah.
Yeah. This Duke team, this was the 7th time in 12 games that our opponent failed to score 60 points. Remember, 60 points, that's not a big number.
Sure.
People just can't do it against Duke.
Right.
No one has even an average game against us. I really think John Shire said it in the preseason. He has repeated it many times. This team's calling card is its defense. So you ask me, what am I concerned about? I'm not concerned about the D. I'm concerned about the offense, because we have shown that we are a truly elite defensive team.
Can't wait to see what Duke basketball looks like in the coming weeks, although there won't be very much of it. Again, with final exams this week and then the holiday break coming and that sort of thing, we'll have some downtime away from.
That's a good thing.
Play. That's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
The consumer, we don't love it as much, but
right.
To enjoy what you're going to watch, it's a very good thing.
I said it earlier. We have one game in 20 days, and one of the listeners to the Duke Basketball Report wrote to us, and he said, these 20 days are the most important part of the season for this Duke team. I don't know if I go quite that far, but his point was this is the time to get Dariq Whitehead integrated.
Yeah.
Think about how well this team has played. I said, like, they're a top 15 kind of club. They are not a team that will be an easy out. They have shown with victories over teams like Iowa and Ohio State that they are very, very capable of playing with, top 25 kind of clubs. They showed at Kansas that they're capable of playing with darn near anyone in the country. And they haven't had a real Dariq Whitehead because we haven't even come close to seeing the real Dariq Whitehead.
Right.
It's there's
big
so
things
much
ahead.
potential there.
Big things ahead for sure. Jason, this is always a blast to get you on the podcast. Thanks again for taking some time to join me today, buddy.
My pleasure.
That's my good pal, Jason Evans from the Duke Basketball Report, joining us today on Locked On Blue Devils. Make sure you check out their podcast. Listen to it for free wherever you get your podcasts. Leave them a 5-star rating and review. The algorithms love it when you type out a written review. Do the same for Locked On Blue Devils if you don't mind. That's going to do it for today's show. Coming up tomorrow, our good buddy Jason Jordan, Locked On and Sports Illustrated's Director of College Basketball Recruiting, will be back for another recruiting look back. That's coming up on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.